Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York, to talk about this and so much more. Congressman, thank you very much for being here this morning. Do you regret going that far in your comments on Monday?
Not at all. Let me say three things. First of all, our top priority has to continue to be to reopen the government in this reckless Trump shutdown, put Americans back to work, and then have a mature conversation about border security. Second, we as House Democrats are going to continue to focus on lowering health care costs, infrastructure, cleaning up corruption, and kitchen table pocketbook issues. Third, with respect to the comments of a few days ago, we've got to have an opportunity for at least one day a year to have a candid, if sometimes uncomfortable, conversation about race. Seems to me that we can't have that conversation on Valentine's Day. We can't have that conversation on St. Patrick's Day. It's perhaps appropriate for us to be able to have that difficult discussion on MLK Day when we're celebrating the life and legacy of a champion for racial and social justice.
Yes, but you called the president the grand wizard, meaning of the KKK. That's language of the KKK. You think the president of the United States is connected to the KKK? He's a Klansman?
Absolutely not. And as you know, Allison, I did not use the words racist in any of my comments. In fact, Wolf Blitzer in the past has asked me whether I believe the president is a racist, and I've consistently said no. I did use a colorful phrase, but of course I don't believe that the president is a card-carrying member of the KKK, but it did capture a troubling pattern of racially insensitive and outrageous at times behavior that spans not months, not years, but decades. In the 1970s, it was the Trump Organization sued by the Nixon Justice Department for racial discrimination against Black and Latino housing applicants. In the 1980s, it was Donald Trump that led the lynch mob that went after the Central Park Five Black and Latino teenagers who were wrongfully accused, wrongfully convicted, wrongfully imprisoned for a crime they did not commit.
Yeah.
For 5 years, it was Donald Trump that perpetrated the racist lie that Barack Obama was not born in the United States of America,
yes,
which was designed to delegitimize our nation's first black president.
Yes.
We haven't even gotten into the behavior that took place in the aftermath of Charlottesville, or the S-hole comment countries about African nations, or the fact that he's hired Steve Bannon, Sebastian Gorka, Stephen Miller, and a parade of other individuals connected to xenophobia and the alt-right.
You make good points, and I think that after Charlottesville, it was you who said that the president was a racial arsonist, meaning, I assume, that he inflames racial tensions. And I think that all of that is demonstrably true, as you've just pointed out. But, you know, the grand wizard, I mean, the reason that I ask you about it is because you call it colorful language, but, you know, isn't that inflaming the situation? Is that helpful, likening someone to the head of the KKK?
Well, I think, as I just pointed out, I do not believe that the president is a card-carrying member of the KKK, but he has presided over and engaged in directly a series of racially insensitive remarks. We cannot whitewash that. We cannot hide it. And on King Day, we should be able to have that candid discussion. Now, I also understand why Americans of goodwill on the left and on the right, Democrats and Republicans, progressives and conservatives, want to give this president or any president the benefit of the doubt. I do as well. And I also believe in the power of redemption, and hopefully we'll see better behavior moving forward as it relates to trying to bring this country together and not peddling xenophobia out of the Oval Office in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I think that's what would make America a stronger country.
Okay, on the note of bringing America together, let's talk about the strategy to ending the shutdown. As you know, it has been Democrats' position that you don't negotiate during the shutdown. That doesn't seem to be working as we are in day 33. What is the strategy today to end it?
Well, today we're going to be bringing to the floor a series of bills that have been negotiated on a bipartisan basis by Democrats and Republicans connected to conference committee discussions or conference level discussions between the House and the Senate that will reopen every other aspect of government that has been recklessly shut down, with the exception of the Department of Homeland Security, which we'll deal with tomorrow. However, in these bills that we're bringing to the House floor today, we have $1.5 billion in border security measures, $500 billion for immigration judges that Trump and his administration have said are necessary to process migrants and others at the border. $500 billion in additional infrastructure to help at legal ports of entry, as well as another $500 billion in humanitarian and other forms of assistance to the Central American Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras.
But no money for a barrier.
Which are the places. Well, we're going to deal with the Homeland Security funding on Thursday. This is additional funding that we as Democrats are saying we support as part of the effort to increase border security. But the initial premise is that we have to reopen the government before we can have a mature and thoughtful and bipartisan conversation about border security. We can't be in the midst of a hostage crisis where you have 800,000 plus public employees being hurt, families being hurt, farmers being hurt, small businessmen being hurt, and others being hurt because of this reckless shutdown.
Everyone understands that logic. That makes sense that you wouldn't want to do it during the shutdown, but it's just not working. The president isn't budging. And so, you know, there's this letter that's a draft letter that has been circulated by centrist Democrats who believe that one way out of the impasse, since the president's not budging on the government shutdown, is to make a promise to the president that if he were to open government today, that you all would agree to debate the border wall and border security funding by a date certain in early February, and that might be one way to break the impasse. Do you agree with that draft letter that we've seen?
Well, I actually haven't seen that draft letter, but I agree with the first part of the letter, which is reopen the government and then let's have a mature conversation about border security, a broken immigration system, comprehensive immigration reform, and debate it in a full and robust fashion. In fact, the continuing resolution that will go to the floor on Thursday will allow for just that. It will extend funding at last year's levels through, I believe, February 28th, reopen the government and allow for us to have a conversation. And Allison, I would also suggest that we have seen some movement. Finally, Mitch McConnell has decided to emerge from the witness protection program and at least put some pieces of legislation on the floor of the United States Senate.
I mean, understood, but those aren't expected to pass.
Well, I don't think that the president's proposal is going to pass, but I still think that there's opportunity for the Democratic-backed proposal that has some bipartisan support to perhaps get over the finish line. We'll have to see what occurs on Thursday.
But would you be willing to have a date certain to, by the end of the month, vote on something? That's what I think the letter is saying, that in order to break the impasse, you have to give the president something. Open government, and we will have a vote on this by the end of the month.
Well, I think that those are decisions that are made at a different level with the Speaker and the chairperson of the Rules Committee and the chairs of the relevant committees. I do think that we are suggesting a date certain, which is a continuing resolution, rather than just reopen the Department of Homeland Security through the end of the fiscal year, which would be September 30th. We're willing to say, let's put in a date certain, February 28th, in the legislation that we're putting forward on Thursday, so we have an opportunity to negotiate. And if the president feels like he needs a deadline to threaten to shut down the government again, we believe that's a reckless approach. But we're willing to say we'll move forward so that within a tight time frame, we can have a window of opportunity to have a discussion.
Yeah, very quickly, Congressman, I'm out of time. Yes or no, is the State of the Union going to happen in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday night?
If the government is reopened, the State of the Union will happen.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, thank you very much for talking with us on New Day this morning.